It was supposed to be another casual late-night interview. Jimmy Kimmel had hosted billionaires, tech moguls, and Hollywood stars countless times. The format was familiar: banter, jokes, some light-hearted conversation, and then a brief foray into the serious topics of the day. But this time, things were different. Elon Musk walked onto the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live, to a mixture of cheers and murmurs. His reputation preceded him, and as he approached the desk, his face was as inscrutable as ever. Kimmel greeted him with his usual charm, offering a handshake that Musk accepted with his usual minimalism. "Elon, it's great to have you here," Jimmy said, with the audience already buzzing. "I think you're the only guest I've had who could probably start a colony on Mars and still make time for a late-night show." Musk gave a half-smile, but his eyes, those piercing, cold eyes, didn't seem to warm. He was here to talk, but what was he really here for? Was it just a routine publicity stint, or was he ready to face something he couldn't control? "So let's get into it," Jimmy continued. "You've been busy with, well, pretty much everything, from running Tesla to overseeing SpaceX, and now you're dipping your toes in artificial intelligence. How do you juggle it all?" Musk leaned forward, his posture casual but controlled. His hands rested on the desk as he spoke. The weight of his words always carried with them a sense of finality. "I don't juggle," Musk replied. "I focus. I've built these companies because I'm driven by one thing: to solve problems. If I didn't have the passion to do this, I'd be out by now. But the challenges I'm facing are too important. They're bigger than any of us." Kimmel nodded, but there was something unsettling in his gaze. He'd interviewed Elon many times before, but tonight was different. The audience could sense it too. This wasn't going to be another fluff piece. There was a simmering tension, something unspoken that hovered just below the surface. Right, solving problems," Jimmy said, his voice turning a little sharper. "But isn't that the problem? You're solving problems that you created. Like your whole Tesla autopilot fiasco. How many people need to crash before you admit it's more dangerous than it's worth?" A collective gasp swept through the audience. Jimmy Kimmel was not one to shy away from controversy, but this wasn't a softball question. This was a direct jab at Musk's most ambitious project. Musk's eyes flickered for a brief moment, but his expression remained unchanged. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. But did Kimmel know what he was walking into? "Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that every innovation is perfect," Musk began, his voice cool and measured. "But the fact is, Tesla's autopilot system is light years ahead of anything on the market. And that's why people get into cars with it. No one's forcing anyone to use it." Kimmel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "But it's not perfect, is it?" "People die because of it," Jimmy pressed, his tone turning more confrontational. "So when are you going to be honest about the risks you're taking with other people's lives?" The studio fell silent. Musk's jaw tightened. The question wasn't new. He had heard it from journalists, regulators, and even shareholders. But something about the way Kimmel had phrased it stung. It was one thing to discuss the issues around his ventures. It was another to be held personally responsible for the failures. "You don't understand the scale of it," Musk responded, his voice low but steady. "People will always find fault. But what we're doing is saving lives in the long run. Without innovations like this, we're stuck in the past. You can't make progress without taking risks." Kimmel wasn't backing down. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And what about the risk to people's lives? Isn't there a line you won't cross? Or is the risk only worth it when it's your vision on the line?" Musk's fists clenched. The crowd could feel the energy in the room shift. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a fight. Kimmel's words had landed with surgical precision. It wasn't about technology anymore. It wasn't even about Tesla or SpaceX. This was about the very philosophy that Musk had built his empire on. The idea that innovation could justify almost any risk. Was that a dangerous mindset? Was it too far removed from reality? In that charged silence, it was clear that something had snapped. The man who had walked in confidently, cool, calculated, was now visibly riled. But what would happen next? Would Musk walk away, or would he turn the tables? The tension in the room was palpable. The usual laughter and applause from the studio audience had gone eerily quiet, as if they were holding their breath. Jimmy Kimmel's playful demeanor had disappeared, replaced by a sharp edge that cut through the air. He wasn't just asking questions anymore. He was challenging Musk directly, pushing him into a corner. Musk shifted in his chair, his jaw tight, but he kept his composure. He wasn't a man who flinched under pressure. He was used to critics, to adversaries, whether in the boardroom or on social media. But tonight felt different. Kimmel was pushing harder than he had ever anticipated. The room had become a battlefield, and there was no turning back now. "Look, Jimmy," Musk said, his voice quieter but more intense. "You're sitting here with the luxury of hindsight, passing judgment. You have no idea what it takes to push the boundaries of technology the way we're doing. You want everything to be perfect right now. But that's not how progress works. You can't invent the future without making some mistakes along the way." Kimmel raised an eyebrow. "Mistakes that could cost lives?" Musk's eyes flashed. He leaned forward, his body language no longer that of the calm, measured mogul the world had come to know. There was fire in him now, something almost primal. He wasn't just defending his companies, he was defending his very philosophy. And that was something no one, not even Kimmel, could undermine. "You're missing the point," Musk said, his voice rising but still controlled. "I didn't get into this to harm people. I'm working to solve problems that no one else has the guts to touch. Yes, there are risks. There always are. But without risk, nothing changes. Nothing improves." He glanced at the audience, who were leaning forward now, hanging on his every word. Musk was always compelling, but tonight, he was more than that. He was convincing, authoritative, even a little intimidating. Was he a genius, or was he delusional? The line had never been thinner. "But how far are you willing to go, Elon?" Kimmel asked, his voice cutting through the silence. "How much destruction is acceptable when you're playing with people's lives? When do we draw the line?" Musk's eyes narrowed. He was no longer interested in answering questions. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a confrontation. "Don't act like you care about the people I'm playing with," Musk retorted, his voice dangerously low. "This isn't about people's lives to you, Jimmy. This is about creating a narrative that fits your agenda. You want to paint me as some kind of villain because it fits your narrative. But you don't have the guts to face the truth, that the real danger is staying stagnant, stuck in the past." The room was on edge. Kimmel's usual smile had disappeared entirely, replaced by a serious, almost confrontational expression. He was no longer just the host trying to get a laugh. He was digging deeper, challenging Musk on every level. "You don't get to paint this as a narrative war, Elon," Kimmel fired back, his voice heated now. "It's not about you. It's about the consequences of your actions. It's about the people who trust you, who trust Tesla, and end up paying the price." Musk's face hardened. "I don't need a lecture from you on consequences," he shot back. "I've faced more consequences than you could ever imagine. I don't need anyone telling me about the stakes. I live them every single day." The audience was silent. The air seemed thick with electricity. Could it be that Musk, the man who prided himself on his calm, collected persona, had finally reached his breaking point? And if he had, what was he going to do about it? "Then why are you here?" Kimmel's words were blunt, almost cruel. "If you can't handle a simple conversation about your own company's risks, what are you doing in the public eye? You've got to own your mistakes, Elon. You can't just shrug it off and expect the world to move on." Musk's hands tightened into fists. His breath was shallow, his heart rate increasing. It was as if every word Kimmel had spoken had piled on top of him, and now he was close to the edge. His reputation, his ideals, his ambitions, everything was on the line. It wasn't just a public appearance anymore. This was a battle for control over his narrative, his empire. And in that moment, the unthinkable happened. Without warning, Musk stood up from his chair, his body tense and rigid. The audience, stunned into silence, watched in disbelief. This was not the plan. This was not part of the show. Kimmel's eyes widened. Elon? But Musk didn't look at him. His gaze was focused straight ahead, his jaw clenched. He turned and started walking toward the exit. No words, no explanation, just the cold, deliberate movement of a man who had reached his breaking point. "Wait, Elon, come on, let's finish this," Kimmel called after him. But it was too late. The door slammed behind Musk, and just like that, the interview was over. The room sat in stunned silence. Was it real? Was this a publicity stunt? Or had Elon Musk just stormed off Jimmy Kimmel's show? The camera lingered on Kimmel for a moment, who was visibly taken aback, his usual confidence evaporating. The audience was still in shock, unsure of what they had just witnessed. And yet, the question remained. What would happen now? Would this alter the public's perception of Elon Musk forever? Could he ever recover from this? The silence in the studio was deafening. Jimmy Kimmel stood there staring at the empty chair where Musk had just been sitting. The audience, frozen in shock, had no idea how to react. Was this real? Was this part of the act? But there was no mistaking it. The situation had escalated into something beyond the usual late-night comedy. Something far more serious. "Well, that was unexpected," Kimmel muttered, his voice carrying a hint of bewilderment. He glanced at the camera, breaking the fourth wall, trying to process what had just happened. The audience was still in stunned silence. But as the seconds ticked by, whispers began to circulate, rising into a low murmur. Musk had stormed off the set, and now the internet was going wild. Across social media platforms, clips of the confrontation quickly went viral. The initial shock of Musk's departure was replaced by a tidal wave of reactions. Tweets, posts, and memes flooded every corner of the internet. Some people were on Musk's side, calling Kimmel unprofessional, while others blasted Musk for walking away from the confrontation rather than defending himself. "Elon Musk storms off set," read one trending headline. "Is this the end of the Musk-Kimmel feud?" asked another. But the real question was more pressing. What did it all mean for Musk's image, and what did it mean for Kimmel? By the time the episode aired later that evening, the news was already spreading like wildfire. "What happens when Elon Musk can't handle the heat?" one headline boldly proclaimed. Social media users were dissecting every word, every pause in the conversation, speculating on what had triggered Musk's emotional response. But one thing was certain. The public image of Musk, already a subject of controversy, had just taken a hit. The man who was once considered a visionary, an innovator, was now being portrayed as someone unable to handle basic criticism. His usual calm, collected demeanor had shattered, leaving only the cold, angry figure who stormed off a late-night talk show in his wake. Was this the real Elon Musk? The unfiltered, emotional side that had never truly been exposed to the public before? Or had he simply lost control in the heat of the moment? As the fallout spread, Kimmel's side of the story was starting to gain traction too. Kimmel, the king of late night, finally stands up to Musk, one post read. Another meme compared Musk to a toddler throwing a tantrum, calling it the biggest meltdown of the year. There were even conspiracy theories emerging. Some claimed that Musk's exit was a calculated stunt to stir up drama and increase ratings. But deep down, most people knew it wasn't. While the internet had exploded, Kimmel was quick to respond to the incident, releasing a statement through his social media account. "I don't know what happened, folks," he wrote, his tone much less playful than usual. But I think we can all agree that no one expected that interview to go the way it did. For those who think I was being too harsh, I just wanted to get to the truth. That's what we do here. The statement did little to quell the storm. In fact, it only seemed to add fuel to the fire. The accusations against Kimmel were piling up, but Musk had yet to speak on the matter. And as the hours ticked by, the world was waiting for his response. Would he take the high road, apologize for his outburst, and try to salvage his image? Or would he dig in, stand firm in his beliefs, and let the critics take their shots? It didn't take long for Musk to break his silence. Late that night, he tweeted, "I walked off because I won't tolerate being bullied on live television. Some people just don't get it. I'm here to change the world, not to play games." The tweet quickly garnered thousands of likes and shares. Musk's followers rallied behind him, with many praising his refusal to back down from a confrontation. To them, this was exactly the kind of attitude they expected from a man who had built an empire. It was proof that Musk wasn't afraid to challenge the system, even if that system was a late-night talk show. But Kimmel's fans weren't having it. "Musk can't handle basic criticism." "Sad," one tweet read. Another replied, "He's a coward. He knew Kimmel was right, and he couldn't handle it." The debate raged on, with each side becoming more entrenched in their positions. But, as the dust began to settle, one thing became clearer. This wasn't just a fight between two famous personalities. This was the latest battle in a much larger war over power, influence, and perception. Musk had always positioned himself as a disruptor, someone willing to challenge the status quo. But was this latest confrontation just another example of that? Or had he finally crossed a line? For Musk, the next few days would be crucial. How would he navigate the fallout from this very public argument? Could he reclaim the narrative? Or was this the beginning of the end of his carefully cultivated public image? And for Kimmel, the aftermath was no less important. How would the public view him after this? Was this the moment that shifted the balance of power in late-night television, where the host, not the guest, came out on top? As the world watched, one thing was clear. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The media storm surrounding Elon Musk and Jimmy Kimmel only intensified as the days wore on. The public could not seem to get enough of the drama. Every new tweet, every new headline added another layer to the already complex situation. Was Musk a visionary genius who had been unjustly attacked? Or was he a man too arrogant to take responsibility for his mistakes? The morning after the incident, a report surfaced claiming that Musk had canceled all upcoming media appearances. Was this his way of retreating, regaining control of his image? Or was it a sign that the fiery confrontation had taken its toll? The silence surrounding Musk's actions only fueled the speculation, and the media could hardly keep up with the breaking news. Meanwhile, Kimmel's ratings had surged. The episode that had witnessed the explosive confrontation between the two had become one of the most watched in late-night television history. Critics praised Kimmel's boldness, his willingness to push Musk into uncomfortable territory. But even Kimmel couldn't have anticipated the full force of the backlash Musk would receive. And while his fans rallied behind him, there were others who began to question whether Musk was really fit for the responsibility he so openly claimed to embrace. Days passed without any significant word from Musk, until he finally returned to social media. This time, his tweet came with a pointed tone, one that seemed to dismiss all criticism. "They call it a meltdown because they don't understand what it's like to stand up for something bigger than themselves. I'm building the future. Critics are a dime a dozen." The tweet quickly went viral, and Musk's followers doubled down on their support. "He's doing what nobody else can or will," some fans tweeted. "When you're changing the world, expect a little pushback." But the pushback was significant, and it was growing. Public opinion had started to shift. Despite his passionate supporters, many people began to question Musk's behavior. Was he the self-assured, progressive force he claimed to be? Or was He's simply an out-of-touch billionaire who couldn't handle a little criticism. The argument had moved beyond the show itself. Musk's departure had opened a floodgate of deeper discussions about his character, his leadership, and his approach to controversy. This was no longer about Tesla's autopilot or the risks of his ambitious ventures. It was about the man himself. Was Musk truly the champion of innovation, or was he someone more dangerous, someone whose ego and refusal to accept accountability might pose greater risks than his inventions? Kimmel, meanwhile, had managed to keep his presence in the spotlight. He had shifted gears, playing the role of the everyman, the host who wasn't afraid to challenge the powerful. His jab at Musk had not only earned him the respect of critics, but had also put him on the map as a fierce commentator on the tech mogul's empire. "You know, folks," Kimmel joked to his audience the following night, "I think Elon's a little mad. Maybe he should go to Mars and work on his temper." The audience laughed, but Kimmel knew the stakes were higher than they seemed. This wasn't just about one confrontation. It was about public perception. And it was a battle for who controlled the narrative. As the media cycle raged on, the battle began to evolve into something more personal. Musk's social media feeds were now filled with angry, passionate responses, not just from fans, but from influential figures within the tech world. Some admired his defiance, while others criticized him for not being a better representative of the industry. Was this just another sign that Musk had alienated people? Or was it a sign that he was truly living up to his role as a disruptor? But amid the chaos, a surprising ally emerged. Steve Jobs' widow, Laurene Powell Jobs, took to Twitter with a message of support for Musk, writing, "Those who have changed the world have always been misunderstood. Keep going, Elon. It's not the critics that matter. It's the future." That tweet sparked a flurry of responses. Was Laurene Powell Jobs' support a game-changer? Could it sway public opinion back in Musk's favor? However, the support from Powell Jobs couldn't erase the damage done. The media had already begun to paint Musk as a man who couldn't stand being confronted. Critics began to compare his behavior to that of other powerful individuals who had crumbled under pressure. Musk's refusal to admit any fault was becoming a point of contention, one that made it harder for people to separate his achievements from his arrogance. At the same time, Kimmel's retorts and jabs were starting to become more biting. He wasn't just the funny host anymore. He had become the man who stood up to Musk, who challenged the narrative of Silicon Valley's untouchable elite. His fans were fueling the fire, and each new segment he aired brought more support for his cause. Musk, it seemed, was at a crossroads. Would he embrace the role of the misunderstood genius, doubling down on his fight against criticism? Or would he take a step back, reevaluate his approach, and learn to accept the harsh reality that not everyone would worship him for his grand visions? The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about Musk's image anymore. It was about the very idea of what it meant to be a leader in the 21st century. Was it enough to be a visionary, or did one have to answer for the consequences of their actions? As the drama unfolded, it became clear. The confrontation between Elon Musk and Jimmy Kimmel was just the beginning of a larger battle for dominance, not just on television, but in the court of public opinion. And in the end, it was the audience, both online and off, that would decide who emerged victorious. As the days passed, the conversation about Elon Musk's explosive exit from Jimmy Kimmel's show began to lose its novelty. The initial shock had worn off, and the media frenzy was starting to settle into a more sober analysis of the event. But while the noise may have quieted, the implications were far from over. Musk, ever the enigma, had gone largely silent after his last tweet, except for the occasional cryptic post. His fans were still rallying behind him, but the cracks in his carefully constructed public persona were starting to show. The man who once seemed invincible was now facing questions that he hadn't anticipated. Had he become too arrogant? Too defensive? Could he weather this storm, or was the public's perception of him irreversibly damaged? Kimmel, on the other hand, had taken the entire situation in stride. His show was more popular than ever, and his jab at Musk was now being seen as a moment of victory, not just for him, but for the everyman who dared challenge the almighty tech mogul. He had turned the tables, emerging as the underdog who had exposed Musk's vulnerabilities. The media had spun Kimmel into the role of the man who didn't back down, the man who had stood up to Musk and won. His ratings were through the roof, and the world had watched him navigate the situation with remarkable poise. But for Musk, the repercussions were more personal. In private, he had to face the truth. This wasn't just about a late-night talk show appearance. It was about his image, his leadership, and his reputation. He had tried to control the narrative, but it was slipping from his grasp. His followers were still fiercely loyal, but many had begun to question whether his willingness to engage in public feuds, whether with Kimmel, critics, or even rivals in the tech world, was undermining his own mission. The visionary who had promised to take humanity to Mars was now being painted as someone unable to handle the smallest criticisms. The public's trust in Musk had always been tenuous. For every breakthrough, whether it was Tesla's success or SpaceX's latest rocket launch, there was always a controversy waiting to surface. Musk's ambition was undeniable, but so was his prickly personality. And now, the very thing that had set him apart, the relentless drive to push boundaries, was beginning to feel like a liability. On the morning after Kimmel's victory in the media battle, Musk issued a statement. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't a defiant refusal either. It was more measured, almost reflective. I've always stood by my commitment to progress, even when it means facing adversity. But it's clear that there are those who want to define me by my mistakes, rather than my successes. I won't apologize for that. I won't apologize for pushing the envelope. The statement was met with mixed reactions. His supporters praised him for staying true to his principles. But others, those who had hoped for a more genuine moment of reflection, were left cold. Was Musk truly above reproach, or was this just another example of his refusal to accept responsibility? As the media cycle wound down, Kimmel's team reached out to Musk's camp, hoping to secure a follow-up interview. Kimmel was willing to let bygones be bygones, to provide Musk a platform to discuss the aftermath, to perhaps even make amends. But Musk, ever unpredictable, declined the offer. He wasn't ready to re-enter the spotlight on Kimmel's terms. It was a sign of his stubbornness, but also his unwillingness to let anyone else control the narrative, especially not someone like Kimmel. Instead, Musk turned his attention back to his work. SpaceX continued to soar, and Tesla's stock bounced back from the initial media frenzy. But the lingering question remained: would Musk be able to regain the trust of the public, or had the damage been done? For Kimmel, the world was his stage. The incident with Musk had cemented his reputation as a late-night host willing to take risks, willing to confront the powerful. His audience, once more accustomed to light-hearted jokes and celebrity banter, now saw him in a different light, as someone who could challenge the status quo and stand up for what he believed in. And yet, there was a certain emptiness in Kimmel's triumph. He had won the media war, but in doing so, he had exposed a raw nerve in the public psyche. The incident with Musk had made one thing clear: our heroes are flawed, and sometimes they fall. Kimmel had celebrated the fall of a titan, but in the back of his mind, there was always the understanding that Musk's flaws didn't make him any less powerful. If anything, they made him more dangerous. The world would move on from the incident. Musk would continue to lead his companies. Kimmel would remain the king of late night, and the rest of us would go back to our lives. But one thing would never be the same again. The idea of Musk, the man who once seemed invulnerable, had cracked. He had been exposed not as a villain, but as a man, imperfect, human, and struggling to balance his enormous ambition with the consequences of his actions. So, in the end, who had won? Musk, with his refusal to back down, or Kimmel, with his fearless confrontation? The answer wasn't as simple as the world might have hoped, because in the battle between them, both had revealed something deeper: the cost of power, the price of ambition, and the price of standing up for what you believe in. In the end, it wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was about the journey they had taken to get here, and the reminder that no matter how high we climb, we're all vulnerable to the same struggles. The fight was never just about one man versus another. It was about the forces that shape us, the narratives we build, and the price we pay to maintain control of our own story.